Come on. Yes, sir. I think that one of the downfalls is, depending on where it is, solar farms are going to eat up a lot of agricultural space, right? So if you have, say, prime agricultural property, are you going to lose a lot of that based on this solar farm? So, you know, you can certainly draft regulations around that to try and minimize that loss, like, for instance, designating where they might be located, even within the agricultural district, by either separating prime agricultural land from agricultural land that may not be as well suited to growing crops. That's one way you could do it. You could also do it by an overlay district and saying, okay, we're going to allow solar farms as opposed to just solar panels. Solar farms in this area of the township, and this is where they can go. So those are some of the adverse effects. And again, along with maybe glare coming off of the panels that could affect adjacent properties. But those problems are not insurmountable. They're much easier to deal with than they are in winter. Yes, sir.
We did get a correspondence from Carroll Municipal Airport out there from Ellen Weiss, and they're very concerned about the glare on airplanes coming into the airport there. So they've already made a stand on this. Denmark County, we're really looking at some kind of an ordinance, or where are we headed?
Yeah, so the question is about, you know, glare affecting airports and whether or not ordinances can address that. They certainly can. And so you just, depending on the types of location, one thing you could do, for example, is you could define those areas in which solar energy farms will be permitted, right? So if you took a map and you laid out, say, an airport or airstrips around there, you could pretty well determine where you might want them or allow them, and you might not want them because of that glare. Yes, sir.
Okay, you're talking about solar farms. Now, what about residential solar energy, and how do you have ordinances that have been drafted for those?
Yeah, so the last, so the question is whether we've drafted ordinances for residential use solar panels. And so when we sat down and drafted a solar energy ordinance, we approached it in sort of the same manner as we did with wind energy, dealing with both the commercial side of it, right? That those entities that are involved in the commercial production of electricity versus private on-site use, because they're different. And so we did that the same way with solar panels. So solar farms, commercial production, they have one set of regulation. Residential has a different set of regulations that are not as burdensome, frankly, because they're not going to have nearly as many solar panels. But they address things like pole-mounted versus roof-mounted, or I think it's side-mounted solar panels on sides of buildings. So the residential use portion addresses all of that. Yes, sir.
Do you know how they're set?
The solar panels?
And then,
Yeah, no, on the commercial solar farm, I have not yet looked to see what the STC is doing with those. I should. There's a large solar farm right by Lapeer, north of 69. I drive by all the time, so I think that one may be fully built out now, but I'd have to check.
I kind of wondering, wind turbines, are they personal property, or does anybody know?
I think they are industrial property, but here's the interesting thing about the wind turbines, and you know, I've been doing this long enough where the wind turbine companies, and I tell my clients all the time that I'm neither anti-wind nor pro-wind. That's not my job. That's the elected folks' job to decide those issues on how you're going to regulate them, to what extent you want to regulate them. But the interesting part is I've been to a lot of these pitches where the the manufacturers and the wind energy companies will come in and they'll promise you all this tax revenue, right? You're going to get all this money. Counties are going to get money, and townships will get money, and so on and so forth. And then they appeal every single one of them to the state tax commission as soon as they get it. I mean, there are hundreds of cases pending right now involving wind turbines. Yes, sir.
What is the life, I got a couple part question. What is the life of a wind turbine? And is the government, federal government still giving a lot of tax incentives for those? And then, why can't we have more nuclear power plants where it takes up a very small physical area, I mean, maybe 50 or 100 acres, rather than spread them out over the amount of acres that what it takes for a wind to replace what nuclear can produce in a small area?
So those are very good questions, but more policy issues than are legal questions. So I'll give you my answer, my legal answer, which is at least on the useful life of a wind turbine depends where you go and who the manufacturers are and how well they're maintained and operated. But I think you could safely say that they're likely going to be around 10, 15, 20 years. I understand, although I have not independently verified, that there are still subsidies for those, tax credits for those wind turbines. As for the nuclear, that's an issue that you'd have to bring up with your state and federal legislators. Yes, sir. Yep.
As far as zoning for turbines, setbacks, decibel levels, at what point does that become exclusionary?
It's a good question, and that's probably the biggest question we wrestle with all the time. It used to be, when I started dealing with wind turbines, that the industry standard, if you will, was probably a 55 dBA limitation. There are some municipalities now that are requiring a 35 dBA at night at property lines, which would have a tendency to then create a bigger setback too. At what point does it become exclusionary? I can't answer that, mostly because the courts haven't answered it either. And so I don't think that requiring a reduced, if you went, for example, and you said, look, we're going to require a sound limit of 35 dBA at night from the hours of 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. at the property line. But during the day, we're going to allow 40, 45 dBA. I don't think that that's exclusionary. It may not maximize profit, but that's not the point of zoning. And so it's a fine line, and I think some of those questions will ultimately be answered, but I can't give you a definitive bright line test. Yes, sir.
You know, I was going to the same place gentleman behind me just asked. My question is kind of a general one. Is there a lot of litigation right now from petitioners that want to put in solar farms or wind farms?
There's, in the last week, there are 2 more, I'll tell you that. So, yeah, I mean, you know, it's a tough issue for a community. They're trying to balance the sort of the interests of those who clearly don't want them versus the interest of property owners who want to make money from them, as well as debating. I mean, we could debate all day the wisdom of wind turbines and whether they actually are green energy. I don't tend to get into those policy debates because for my purposes it doesn't really matter. But we are going to litigate, I think, a couple of these cases and get some answers to some of those questions, hopefully. Yes, sir.
Sir, really. Hey, once some of these wind farms are up and running, and when the gentleman brought up useful life of one of these, once they're beyond their useful life, and they decide, well, this really wasn't a profitable wind farm, what type of teeth does a local unit of government have to have it reclaimed back to the original property so that that albatross doesn't sit there not functioning for?
So what we generally do is in a zoning ordinance, we require decommissioning. So for example, all of the commercial uses, whether it's wind or solar, are special use permits, right? So you got to go through this arduous process of, you've got site plans and you've got review and then you've got recommendations from the planning commission to the township board. Part of that special use permit process will require a decommissioning plan, both on wind and solar. That decommissioning plan will require the posting of bond in order to remove them when they have outlived their useful life, or if they are no longer functioning. So I think the last wind ordinance I did said if you are not, if a wind turbine has not produced electricity for 6 months, then it needs to be decommissioned. Something to that effect. And that money that's posted, here's the real problem, is that the money that's posted, even if you have, say, a surety bond, at what point does that surety bond expire? What happens if the company goes bankrupt, right, that owns it? And so what we did is we actually made the landowner and the owner of the tower responsible. And so, because if the wind company walks away, you've still got this turbine that's there on somebody's property and they're responsible for it. All right, well, I'll be around afterwards as well, but other people, apparently need to give other people a chance to talk. And so, but like I said, I'll be around, you can ask me anything.